Fujifilm has been on a roll lately, which makes me happy as a dedicated Fujifilm shooter. Last year, they released the popular point-and-shoot, the X100 Mark VI, and people ate that up. I don't even think you can find this camera for retail at the moment. But back in November, Fujifilm dropped the XM5, which has a similar form factor to the X100 VI with a few subtle changes. Some of these changes caught my eye, so I decided to rent it and test how it performed as an entry-level creator camera. I decided while I was at it to compare it to a similar camera in Fujifilm's lineup. I'll bet this is at a higher price point, and that camera is the Fujifilm XS20. The main feature that caught my eye on this tiny beast of a camera was the option to record 6K open gate. Now for those of you who might not have heard of that before, open gate is a format that records the whole sensor size instead of being slightly cropped. So now you can reframe for other platforms way easier. No more awkward reframing in post. And the kicker is not many cameras have this feature. Canon, Nikon, and Sony don't have any cameras with this feature. This is where Fujifilm, Panasonic, and Blackmagic are crushing it. This feature is a godsend for many creators because now you don't have to re-record for other platforms that use vertical video. And yes, TikTok is kind of up in the air at the moment, but there are other platforms that utilize vertical video, and the reframing for vertical is not the sole reason to use OpenGate. Now, Fujifilm has 3 cameras with OpenGate. The XM5, which we have here, the XS20, which we will be comparing in this video, and the high-end XH2S. Now, I didn't grab the XH2S when I rented these because it is ridiculously expensive, and I didn't think it was feasible for most creators to spend that much on a camera just for OpenGate, especially when these cameras are available for less than half the price, because the XH2S retails for about $2,500 USD. My first impression of these two cameras is that I really like the feel of the XS20 more than the XM5. I really like the grip and the bigger battery. I also really like the ISO button, and I wish my X-T4 had that. Both the XM5 and the XS20 have these nice little flip out doors on the side, which is a lot better than my X-T4. I actually tore out the little plastic things off because they kept getting in the way. The IBIS in the XS20 is also really handy to have. And I understand you can't put that in the XM5 because it's really small, but the XS20 is very nice to have for the IBIS alone. Now, sadly, that's where the praise ends for the XS20. The ergonomics of the XM5 are, in my opinion, better optimized for a beginner and for content creation. The button and port layout is much better, and while I was hooking up the HDMI cable on both for stream, I realized they were on opposite sides, and the XS20 has it on the same side that the screen flips out on, which makes it useless if you're going to be streaming and using this to monitor yourself. The XM5 has nothing blocking the screen on this side, which, thank you Fujifilm, that was a great update. Can you please do that for all of your cameras moving forward? The audio jack on both of these are actually placed really nicely. The XS20 has it higher up on the side that the screen flips out on, but it doesn't interfere with the screen anymore. And the XM5 has it behind one of the dials on the back, pretty close to where the EVF would be if it had one. And both cameras have a headphone jack. Once again, thank you, Fuji. So the one thing I dislike about the XM5's ergonomics is the film simulation dial. I get why it's there, but I'm not a big fan of it. If I was handing it to my wife as her daily carry while we are out on vacation, or I'm using it for leisure, but that's not what we are assessing today. I'm also not a fan of the memory card being next to the battery inside the battery port. I've never been a huge fan of this, and I prefer it to be like the X-T4 or the X-T3, where the memory cards are on the side. I get that these are smaller bodies, so maybe there's something design-wise, but if that could be fixed, I'd be very happy, because the thing is, if you have a tripod plate attached, and you have to remove the camera and the plate from the tripod in order to access the card. I just want easier access to the card without interrupting the flow of a shoot. I tested these cameras for a week. I used them to stream and film some content, and I had some interesting results. While streaming, I was also testing how these bodies handle overheating. This is my X-T30 Mark I, and it is normally my main streaming camera, and I have never had an overheating warning pop up on this body. For both of these cameras, I adjusted the settings so that the cameras would shut down at higher temperatures, or in this case, they would be able to stay on for a longer time at hotter temperatures. and the main cooling setting was prioritizing camera temperature instead of noise. Now, I didn't have the fan accessory, but I feel like these two cameras would greatly benefit from having them, and I am inclined to say that they are a must-have purchase. Now, my results from streaming were not what I expected. The XS20 died on me mid-stream, and I had to swap it out for the XM5. Now, the XM5 did not die on me over a long stream, but I did get the heat warning. Mind you, this was a stream that was about 4 hours long. During my stream, I took note on when I got these heat warnings and when the cameras, if they did die, they died. Let's get Shadowheart. Oh! Oh! Alright, looks like at an hour, at the 1 hour mark, the XS20 died. Alright, I'm gonna swap out to the XM5. Yeah, and for some reason, the settings on the XM5, even though same lens, it just renders darker for some reason. So like, I am at 7% on my light. I'm not quite sure if you'll be able to read that, but I'm gonna have to up this to get the same light quality. And I think it's because of the stupid presets on this camera. There we go. I see what it did. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for the assistance. But yeah, basically the XS20, you know what? Let me actually switch over. The Fujifilm XS20 died at approximately 1 hour of streaming and a little bit before 30 minutes into the stream. So I'm gonna probably guess somewhere between 20 to 25 minutes, I got a heat warning. It was the yellow indicator. The red indicator came on a little bit later and it held on for quite a while. I'm very disappointed in the fact that the XS20, which is a much larger body, was the one that died first, because I filmed with the XM5 earlier, but none of the footage survived the archive from Instagram, which is unfortunate. But the XM5 lasted for 2 hours. I did get a heat warning a half hour in, so the heat warning came on for both of them at approximately 30 minutes. And that's being generous for the XS20, but right around the 30-minute mark, they were both doing fine. Now, I'm concerned because the XS20 is a much larger body, so you can fit a bigger fan in there. You can do a lot with that. It has a bigger battery. Considering the XM5 is able to last longer, and we're going to test that again. This is going to be the second test. We're going to go and see how long this goes. So right now we're at about an hour and 15 minutes. So we're going to see how long it takes for a yellow indicator to show up. And there's a chance I might miss it, but we're going to see how long it lasts. No rest for the wicked, I see. Oh, okay. So we are 1 hour and 56 minutes, and we just got the heat warning, the yellow heat warning, which is the we are approaching the heat temperature. So let me come over here. So looks like I was right, about a half hour, little more, I believe, because I think we said 1:15. We were at an hour and 15, and it was an hour and 56 minutes. So pretty close to a half hour. That seems to be about the benchmark that we are getting for the XM5. So we're getting, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that we are optimizing this thing short of using the fan. So these things are heating up a lot more than the older cameras. I have done like 4-hour streams with my XT30, and my XT30 is a much older camera, and I am very surprised because it also has like an unoptimal screen for this. So like you would think that one of the cameras that has this fully articulating screen would be better equipped to handle these temperatures. And like I mentioned before, the XS20 did not get like noticeably hot. It was not noticeably warm to the touch like other cameras I have. Like my XT4, when that thing overheats, that thing gets hot. My XT30, I've never had it overheat on me before. But the XS20 and the XM5, they are not hot to the touch when they start to overheat. And even when they've overheated, because we grabbed the XS20 immediately when it shut down and we swapped it out for the XM5, and I felt the back. I completely stopped. I didn't stop the stream, but I removed all of the ports and everything, and it didn't feel any different as if it had been turned off. And it hadn't been off for more than like a minute. So to me, that indicates there's something wrong with the internals, and I don't think it would be recommended as a streaming camera, which is unfortunate because the price point for the XM5 and the XS20 is actually really good. So as you saw, both cameras gave a heat warning around the 30-minute mark, with the XM5 lasting the longest and not dying on me. For streaming, the clear winner is the XM5. Now, I was able to stream for about 3 to 4 hours, and I had this running a little bit longer, so probably think closer to 5. And while it didn't shut down, it did give me the initial heat warning, and it kept the yellow indicator on the whole time after the 30-minute mark. Again, sadly, I did not have the fan, but if Fujifilm wants to send me an XM5 and a fan accessory to test out, I will happily run those tests on a long stream. The XM5 does get warm when the warning comes on, but it's not burn your hand hot or even to the point where you can't hold it. I was surprised at the XS20 because when I swapped out the camera, I felt the back and the camera didn't appear hot at all compared to the XM5. The XS20 timed out at just under an hour on stream, so a little over an hour of running because it was on briefly before going live. If this was a point system, the XM5 would have gotten a point and the XS20 would have gotten nothing since it shut down. One thing I've heard people complain about when talking about anything that's not Sony or Canon is that the autofocus is terrible, and if I'm being honest, that's just not true. The autofocus is really good. Now, is it as clinical as Sony's or Canon's? No. But you shouldn't be having an issue with it. I would say it shouldn't even be a determining factor in your decision, but for those of you who do want to know, I did run some autofocus tests, and the XM5 struggled when trying to film B-roll of the XS20, and the AF kept hunting. And I did eventually fix it in the settings, but the XS20 did not have any problems whatsoever. I'm pretty confident that the issue with hunting was fixed because I never had that happen again afterwards, but that's something to keep in mind. Now, one thing that is in line with autofocus is the ability to control your settings, and I did have a hard time finding the right controls, and I am someone who uses Fujifilm cameras all of the time. The main issue I ran into was that Fujifilm made a lot of the settings dependent on being in certain settings, and depending on what mode you're on, you have limited controls. I do not like how the video mode on here doesn't give me the option to control all of my settings without the need to dig deep into the menus. By default, it goes into this weird semi-auto setting, and I hate that because I had my settings dialed in, and the only way to get rid of that display info was sending a feed through HDMI is to be in the video mode. But the video mode then messes with your settings unless you dig in. Again, I really wish it had a little flip dial like the XT4 that lets you switch between photo and video, or I really like having this little red record button. And it's possible that I just didn't have enough time with the cameras to learn all of the ins and outs, but if after a week and multiple deep dives into the settings I barely figured out, that's bad. And sadly, this was the case for both the XM5 and the XS20. Now, the nice thing for recording is that you can do manual settings in photo mode, and again, hit the little red button. Also, in order to get into the full video menu, you need to be in video mode and not manual. You have to go into the settings and do manual video mode. Overall, not a fan of the experience. I would love to see Fujifilm fix that with a firmware update. Both of these cameras also come with log formats, which, considering the XM5 is a entry-level is a huge deal. They both have Fujifilm's latest log profiles, so f-log1 and f-log2. This will give you the opportunity to play around with log if you feel so inclined. Both cameras come with a single card slot. The XM5 has a UHS-1 card slot, while the XS20 over here has a UHS-2. The LCD screens on both cameras are nothing to write home about, but the XS20 is especially rough in terms of quality in my experience with it. So let's talk about price, because I think that's a really important factor here. The XM5 is meant to be an entry-level camera, and it retails for $800. It's supposed to be a starter camera, and you can see that clearly in the size and the feel of this. The XS20, by comparison, is larger and clearly has a less beginner-friendly design. Technically, the XS20 is not part of the Pro line. It's still more of a consumer-based product, but I would say at the intermediate level. And the price reflects that. At $1,300, the XS20 is a bit more expensive, but it makes you look more professional, and it has some additional features that entry-level cameras are not going to have. Not a big deal, but the price difference is actually relevant. For the price of the XS20 body, you could deck out your XM5 to be a really strong content. And I'm going to include a lens in this price. You start with $800 for the XM5 body, 100-ish for a cage so that you can mount some accessories and get a better grip on this tiny little thing, a fan accessory to help with overheating, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and not recommend the Fujifilm version just because of how expensive it is. So that's gonna leave Ulanzi and small rig for about $50. So right now we're just under $1,000 and we need a lens. I highly recommend the Fujinon 23mm f2. This thing is really easy to find refurbished or used for less than $300. Now you can get any monitor or opt out of getting a monitor, but I'm going to put a budget of $200 just in case that's something you might want. I find it beneficial to have because I'm blind, but you know, if you want to save some money on the budget, don't bother, especially with the flip out screen. For the cost of the XS20 and a single lens, this same lens, you could have a really strong and competent rig to do most content at home and still save several $100s. My final thoughts on the XM5 are that it is a powerful starter camera that hits well above its weight class. And it is a solid recommendation for anyone looking to get into content creation, with a few caveats, but those are all fixable for the most part. Now, I didn't have much time with the camera and I'm not a big streamer. I'm a photographer first. So if you want to get a more in-depth look at how this camera works as a dedicated stream camera, I know that Harris Heller mentioned he was going to be testing it, and when his video is out, I'll have it linked in the description below. Now, I really do like the feel of the XS20, and I really did enjoy shooting with this, but I just can't get over the fact that it overheats to the point that it shuts down, and the poor port layout. If Fujifilm did an updated XS20 and put the ports on the opposite side of the screen, like they did here in the XM5, and they fixed the overheating, I would probably buy it. But for right now, I'm going to be grabbing the XM5 as my main at-home content camera, and I would highly recommend. If you found this video helpful, it would mean a lot if you could leave a like, a comment, or subscribe. If you're interested in purchasing the XM5, I will have affiliate links in the description below. Now, I have a question for you guys in the comments. What camera do you use for streaming if you stream? And what are some of the most important features you look for in a streaming camera? And on the flip side, what is the most important thing for you as a content creator in terms of camera features? Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, guys.